I went through all 32 NFL teams to figure out exactly how each coach affects your fantasy football team. Today's episode, the New England Patriots. So take a seat, class is in session. So to start off with, has there been any coaching changes? Yes, they actually got an offensive coordinator. And he's a bit of a New England legend, that is Bill O'Brien. His specialty is quarterbacks. You can see this from his previous time with the New England Patriots to where he then went with the Texans, and now he's back with the Patriots. And then we still have good old Billy B rocking down the defense. Now this offseason, they didn't really lose too much. And in my personal opinion, I felt like they filled that via free agency and from what we saw them do in the draft. And they're currently the front runners to sign DeAndre Hopkins. I wouldn't say it's a sure thing whatsoever, but considering Bill O'Brien's history with the Texans, I think it's looking that way. On top of that, one of his requisites that he had for this was that they had a top 10 defense. Now, by the time this gets posted, anything could change. And I have a nagging feeling that DeAndre Hopkins might be signing with the Kansas City Chiefs, but that's entirely contingent on Chris Jones. Now that we've got a strong idea of the general direction in which the New England Patriots are built towards this season, we can start to dive into exactly how Bill O'Brien realistically affects our overall fantasy teams. But before we do that, we need to check with the guys upstairs to see exactly how they have the New England Patriots projected this season so we can give our knowledge a little bit more structure. The New England Patriots are currently slated to go last in their overall division, and currently slated to go somewhere between 7 and 8 wins, but I think this team might surprise a lot of people. I think that's highly dependent upon Mac Jones' leap more than anything, but I think it's definitely there. But we'll save Mac Jones' spiel for Mac Jones time. I'm going to keep him at that consensus 4th overall spot, but I really wouldn't be surprised if they take a step forward with how great that defense is more than anything. And I think their offensive line is a little bit underrated. But at this second in time, it doesn't really look like they're going to make the playoffs, and it doesn't really look like they're going to take that step forward, so I'm going to agree with consensus and be somewhat bearish on this team, but I'm a little bit more optimistic than most. But now that we have a general direction in which the New England Patriots are built towards this season, we can start to dive into exactly how Bill O'Brien actually affects our overall fantasy football teams. So to start it off first, let's go with the quarterback, Mac Jones. Now, Mac Jones was the actual best processor in his class, and if you look at the charts here, there's a very nice history for quarterbacks, albeit that is primarily Tom Brady. But we also saw what Bill O'Brien did with Deshaun Watson. But considering Mac Jones is the best processor in his class, I don't think it's out of reach to say he's going to take a step forward. I mean, considering that they also might be landing D-Hop as well. This receiving core could honestly be looking really, really nice. So for me, I'm honestly going to take a slight leap with Mac Jones and put him in that like 16 to 17 range, maybe even go a little bit to 18. So honestly, let's just go 17 fantasy points flat. I think that's a really good kind of estimate for somebody that didn't have a lot of direction last year. And I think that's the biggest theme that we're going to see overall. And I'm going to go on a little bit of a rant here. So the reason why I like Mac Jones overall is because he had a sophomore slump, but it's not like your typical sophomore slump, right? There was no true offensive coordinator there to give him direction. He had no idea what he was really doing. Because it's like when you don't have a true mentor to really look at and be like, hey, how do I adjust this? It kind of makes me think that like Mac Jones didn't have a true sophomore slump compared to like most teams. So for me, I look at it and I'm like, okay, I think that there's actually a lot more room for growth than people are considering, especially when you hear around the actual NFL scouts and so on, and what they're saying is that Mac Jones was the true best processor in that class. So I don't know, for me, I think this New England Patriots team is a little bit better than people are giving it credit for. And as somebody, I really don't mind taking a dart throw on a few drafts. Moving over to the RB1, and that is Ramondre Stevenson. Now looking at the chart here, there's definitely an overall uptrend for the most part with these running backs, but I think we need to take a step back here. And I don't think a lot of people are going to want to hear that because I know the hype that is coming with Ramondre Stevenson this season. And these are my causes for concern, so just follow my logic here, all right? So when you look at the New England Patriots last year, you see the overall pass-catching upside that Ramondre had, and it was amazing. But I think the real reason we saw such a high level of passing catching upside wasn't because of like Ramondre being that amazing in the pass game, even though he is great. I think it's more of just Mac Jones not knowing who to throw to. And these are going to be kind of nuanced situations that I'm going to reference to because I think they kind of give us good context for what's going on here. So we'll start off with something that's in season, and that's Justin Herbert, who had a true offensive coordinator working on, and that of Joe Lombardi. But the difference with Justin Herbert was he was injured, and his receiving core was also injured, so more often than not, he was willing to throw the check down. Which means when you're not able to get the ball down the field or really understand when to get it down the field or who to, you're going to pass it down to that receiving back. Obviously, Mac Jones was in that same scenario, but it kind of gives me the precedent of like, okay, if you're not really comfortable throwing the ball down the field, you're more often than not going to throw it to your closer guy. And what we did see specifically with Austin Eckler, to kind of deviate for a second here, is that when Mike Williams and Keenan Allen were fully healthy, Justin Herbert was still throwing that ball down the field, and overall Austin Eckler's upside went down. But as we saw the injury kind of labored more, he was like, all right, I just need to throw it to the side and get it to Austin Eckler, and he'll make things happen for me. It's kind of a fair line of logic I feel like to follow here. And we can look at Ben Roethlisberger as well. He didn't really throw the ball down the field too much, albeit that was primarily because of age, not because of offensive coordinator or lack of NFL IQ. But that was why we saw Najee receive so much in the receiving game overall. And he had a ridiculous amount of hype coming into his second year, and then he failed to meet those expectations over and over and over again. And I saw fantasy analysts kind of giving a relatively similar point. And it kind of makes me draw to the same conclusion with somebody like Ramondre Stevenson. Now, is he still going to get the work? Yes, 100%. He's still going to be amazing, in my personal opinion. But I think he's a bit overvalued. And considering that they were actually looking at signing someone like Dalvin Cook, also makes me kind of wonder, it's like, maybe they're not as confident as Ramondre as we're all kind of thinking. Now, is this all speculation and hearsay? Yeah, 100% it is. Now, I'm going to go with 13 as my fantasy points per game for him. Do I think that's a little bit bearish considered what most are expecting him to do? Yes. But that's where I feel comfortable with kind of a floor for him right now and almost a little bit of a ceiling. I just can't really decide which way I want to go with it because I really don't know the true direction in which they're going to utilize him this year. Because who knows, maybe my analysis is completely dumbfounded. Moving over to the RB2 and a massive question mark. For where it stands at this point in time, I'm going to say it's going to be Ty Montgomery. But whoever the RB2 here is, I think they're going to receive a little bit more work than people are expecting. I'm going to go with an 8 fantasy point per game floor, but who knows? Bill Belichick loves to run his running backs under the ground, and the backup guy could be taking a lot more reps than people want. And then who knows? Maybe the RB1 kind of takes a fall or whatever. I have zero idea what's going to happen, but Bill Belichick likes to run his running backs into the ground. I mean, think about it, right? Damian Harris had a 15-touchdown season, and then Ramondre basically stole that role entirely away from him. Billy B's not afraid of going off of a very good running back. But who knows? Bill O'Brien might change some things. But to me, going off the chart here, it does look like it's on an uptrend, and that's kind of the general thesis that we can kind of go for a floor at least. Moving over to the wide receiver one, and that theoretically should be Juju. Will it be Juju? We don't know at this point. But whoever the wide receiver one is has a very nice floor. Like, they're going to be an absolute fantasy monster. And for all we know, it could be Devontae Parker with that contract extension. So for me, I'm going to say a 16 fantasy point per game floor is very safe for whoever the true wide receiver one is in New England, which could very well be D-Hop. All I know is you should be targeting those New England receivers late. Because that's also another facet that I feel like people are kind of missing on is like, it doesn't really matter too much, so to speak, if you're going with like a mobile quarterback and his wide receiver one or the vice versa, like a pocket passer kind of guy. But more often than not, those guys who are throwing from the pocket don't have that same level of mobile. But at the same time, like those guys who aren't nearly as mobile are going to be throwing the ball a lot more. They don't have the same versatility to their game. Moving over to the wide receiver two, and potentially another really undervalued piece here. I'm going to say it is Juju Smith-Schuster. I don't know if I just said it was Devontae Parker, but whatever one. That's what I'm saying as well. It's like we really don't know who's going to ebb and flow, but you can get a lot of value on the receivers in these drafts. I'm going to say a 13 to 14 fantasy point per game kind of trend here is very safe. But holistically, I'm extremely excited about whoever ends up in this role. Moving over to the wide receiver three, and where we do see kind of a bit of a drop-off to some extent, but what appears to be in a definite uptrend, Tyquan Thornton. I don't know. This receiving room looks like it might be changing a lot, so it's really hard to say who's going to be what specific role in this offense. I would just be buying as many pieces cheap as possible. And the reason I'm not high on Tyquan is because they just extended Devontae Parker, and you can get him so much later for value in drafts. It's crazy right now. Like, the man just signed for 3 years for $33 million, dude. I don't know, maybe that's a little bit of money or whatever, but to me that seems like a lot more than people are expecting. Lastly, moving over to the tight end and a guy that you should be taking some definite deep throws on drafts, and that is Mike Gesicki. Now, is he going to reach Rob Gronkowski type numbers? No. But I do find it very interesting that he's playing a lot with the wide receivers, specifically in minicamp and so on. Like, he wasn't being told, all right, go work on your blocking. They're like, no, we need to see your hands. So I think we can kind of balance on a little bit more of an upside where he's probably going to see some really nice spike weeks and we go with like a 9 to 10 fantasy point floor here. So just to recap, I know we're just kind of in the preseason. We haven't even gotten to actual like training camp itself with just kind of a lot of hearsay. But remember, this is all based off of coaching trends so we can get a general basis of where we're going. Like, if you utilized this last year, you would have found out that Geno Smith was going to theoretically be really strong if you went just off the trends themselves. Because the coaches have a better impact on exactly how the players are going to go about it. And seeing Bill O'Brien come back to like a really strong prospect and that of Mac Jones, who's going to have a much better pocket presence of what he's doing this year, I think there's a lot of upside pieces late in drafts for the New England Patriots that you should be targeting at this second in time. Are you going to get everything you want? No. But I think people are discounting the New England Patriots way too much. I mean, remember, Billy B owns the Jets. And I also don't think that the Dolphins are going to be nearly as strong as this year, so this could be an honest breakout candidate type of team. It just depends on exactly how all the pieces fall. And what's kind of curious to me is that if they do sign DeAndre Hopkins, I imagine his draft stock will fall in fantasy drafts in which we can target him so much more. And he becomes an absolute massive value. So in the meantime, that's all I got for this episode. Really appreciate you guys coming along. Make sure to drop your fantasy football questions down in the comment section below. But as always, in the meantime, peace.